Hello and welcome to another episode of Bring the Fire. Today I'm joined by Christine Hart. Christine emerged from a challenging upbringing to become a seasoned professional in the world of private investigations. Trained as a private detective at the age of 19, she honed her skills under the mentorship of ex-intelligence officers. She took her skills in private investigation and adapted them into becoming an investigative journalist. She wrote for mainstream print media as a result. Christine, great to have you join us. You became a private detective at 19, so basically a kid in many ways. That must have been, exciting and I guess quite frightening as well.
I grew up in care, so I was in a children's home, and that was quite challenging in itself. I went to grammar school, but my mother made sure, my adoptive mother was quite envious of me, so she made sure that I failed. So I was left working in shops, and what happened, a student at the children's home where I was, his father was out of the military and opening an agency. So they wanted young people, really. So a few of us went along, and it was also advertised in the media. And I was one out of about 50 applicants that got the job. So it was interesting in a way. It became quite boring, tracing missing persons, status inquiries. There was undercover work, planting bugs, that kind of thing. But after you've done it and the excitement wears off, and the excitement of telling people you're a PI, it's a little bit same old. And of course, there's the danger involved, like when you're made to go undercover, searching maybe for stolen property or what people are doing. There's the danger involved in being beaten up, that kind of thing. So it wasn't actually a job I enjoyed. It was something that I thought, oh God, I'm stuck here because of the past, and it's quite rough, and you bounce about and you're not paid as much as you should be paid. So, and it's very male dominated as well. I was the only woman that I certainly in that era that I encountered. So it was quite misogynistic as well.
How did you find yourself under the wing of, former intelligence officers? I mean, they must have seen something in you. Obviously, like you say, you're the only female. You must have shown something that they thought, hang on, we can do something here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the fact that I didn't have an identity. So because, I was dumped into an orphanage, and I didn't really have a name. I was given a name, but I don't ever use that name. Then I was given my adoptive name, Christine Hart. And then when they decided, after abusing me sexually and physically, to put me back into care at 13, my father said, you can't use the name Christine Hart, it's our name. But I carried on using it. But it makes you feel like you're sort of a blob and you don't really have any identity. And I think they used that, and I think they saw something in it. And, they saw I was intelligent but hadn't got the qualifications that I needed. And, that I was bitter about that. And I think somebody like that, somebody bitter, somebody that, can be quite dark, it is not going to ask questions as to what they get up to. Some of the things were illegal. Some of the things were downright nasty. And so I think an outsider and somebody that's not part of society is never going to question them, and is never going to say, well, hang on, you shouldn't really be doing that, and go back and tell mum and dad and uncles and aunties that are going to maybe report to somewhere. So they want somebody that's, on their own. And I was really good at having different identities and going undercover for long periods of time in workplaces and having different identities and not caring about that, really.
I'm wondering as well, maybe because you don't have, a connection at that point to the family. It's not just, the people you're working for that is good for, but actually in terms of people maybe that you're investigating, they can't threaten you if they find out who you are and try and use your family to get you to turn or whatever, because, well, I'm not tied to one, essentially.
Yeah, there's that as well. Yeah.
So what kind of cases were you working on in terms of, I'm thinking of the extremes, because obviously a PI can work, to catch a cheating husband, and something much more, kind of, I suppose, every day as that, to then something that's, perhaps much more sinister and, as you've alluded to, illegal and perhaps, a little bit more hidden, a little bit more underground.
Yeah. Well, the agencies I work for, I mean, I started off, at the lower end, obviously, everyone does. And these guys who are doing, the kind of private investigations work that comes through the door, people that want things done on other people and companies and industrial espionage. And then the guys I worked with were all straight out of the army. So they were all ex-MI5, ex-MI6. And they would talk about the other agencies like Kroll and Hacklight and Company X. And they'd say, oh, we must get working for them. So me being the only woman, young and blonde, I would then apply to these agencies. And being a girl at the time, would get the chance to work for them. So I dotted around to all these upper level agencies where the work was a lot more interesting. The work would come through the door and it would be about 50 grand per case. And it would be, like big companies like Lotus Cars, for instance, investigating this one and that one, or wanting someone to cozy up to somebody. Filmmakers that came in the country filming political scandals, they would want somebody to get close to them. So it would be big operations, the kind that Black Cube do. I know people are familiar with Black Cube and all the operations they run, like on Harvey Weinstein, these kind of companies. And they'd work perhaps for the oil companies, go undercover with, these groups, although I never did that myself, but I know they were doing that kind of thing, some of the agencies. And it would be really fascinating work, really interesting, but dangerous. I mean, I worked for a guy who worked for the Russians, and that was interesting as well. I mean, just the work in itself was very exciting, really third-grade spying.
Do you think you can spot people? Like, say, for instance, now you were to watch, I don't know, some television footage of the red carpet and would you be able to now go, he or she, hang on, are there tells for these people that go and cozy up next to people?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when I worked for the press, I started to specialize in the real IRA and the UDA. And I remember going to a meeting in Kilburn, and there was a man there trying to get very close to Francie Mackey, one of the the so-called political wing of the real IRA, the 32 county sovereignty movement. And I smelt that he was undercover. It was really easy to see. And when I worked for the News of the World, I saw how they went wrong with their undercover people. They would send in a reporter maybe to try and score drugs off somebody. And the reporter would be somebody dating a police officer. And so therefore they'd kind of have that scent on them of police officer scent. And they wouldn't know how to go undercover. They wouldn't know how to do it. So I would know, for instance, we were doing one job where I said, no, you need a black guy, and you need a black guy covered in bling, and somebody's really, and of course they dished him up and he got the job. So I think with undercover, people don't really understand. People have a sixth sense, and people go for a kind of a vibe. And if you're vibing wrong, then it's not going to work. So you've actually got to convince yourself first that you are who you say you are. And only then do you convince the other person when you're convinced yourself. It's a bit like Reservoir Dogs, the Tim Roth character, where he spoke to himself in the mirror a lot before he went and did the undercover job, telling himself over and over again. And that's exactly how it is. The best operatives, they don't give off a wrong vibe. I mean, for instance, the man cozying up to the real IRA as a supporter, he vibed all wrong, and it was obvious to me who he was. And later he was revealed as working for the FBI, actually, as an undercover operative.
Wow. Well, what led you into journalism? Is it basically the same thing in a way? You know, being a private detective and then actually then being an investigative journalist. Is there a lot of crossover, or are there subtle differences in that?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of crossover, and of course, you get people that that work for the spooks as well. I think Mazza Mahmood was an intelligence operative, targeting different people, and of course, at the high level, they're controlled by the police and controlled by the state. So there is that, but that's at a higher level. I was lucky that I went in there as a PI to start with, so I had access to the upper levels, and I was quite unusual being a hybrid, that I had skills that the others didn't have. But going into journalism, I mean, I didn't really have an idea that I wanted to do that, because I was abused as a child by my adoptive father. I started to study Ian Brady, the Morse murderer, and was really interested in why somebody that doesn't look ugly is, choosing children to abuse. My father, he was good looking. He had plenty of women chasing him. Why was he interested in me? And I wanted to answer that question. So I was writing to Brady, didn't get a response. Then I thought, I know I've got a good idea. So I went and took photographs of where he used to live and also where he committed the crimes in Mara Hinley. And I said to him, here's one photograph, but if you reply to me, you'll get a whole lot more. So I got a letter back then, finally. And I'd only got a few letters. And I thought, here's somebody that isn't interesting to study. They're quite egocentric. I'm not going to really find out anything. He's posturing. He knows he's famous. He's wearing a mask. You could spend years trying to get underneath his mask. And I just thought, I don't really want to do this. And then he invited me to come and see him, which was quite a shock. And so I trolled off up there, sat with him for an hour. There was a guard in the room. On the third time I saw him, there wasn't a guard in the room. He was allowed to have his visits unsupervised, as he put it. So there was a guard in the room, but they were over the one side of the room. It was a big, quiet room, as I call it, with armchairs. And I was in the middle. There was a little coffee table. He had his he had a flask, a blue flask with his name, Brady, carved down the side, biscuits, 2 cups. He was allowed to pour me a cup of tea. So I sat there for about an hour, just over an hour, and came away thinking, oh my God, that is something that is too much for me. It was rather like suddenly I was a mental health nurse, and I thought, this isn't what I want to do, really. This is a real person, a mental patient in a mental hospital, and it's not really fascinating. It's serious. And I felt kind of burden being placed on me, almost as if, I was a woman. So he sort of placed his depression, anxiety on me. And I thought, this is too much. And I went out of there thinking, well, I'm not going to, I'll just, a letter comes, oops, I've moved or something, and I had this planned. And then next thing I saw in the newspaper, it was the Sunday People that my adoptive parents had. And I'd gone back home at this point, which was kind of all very weird, but I was living back there as a lodger. And I saw the paper and it said, mysterious blonde visits Brady. And the first person that he's seen in 10 years. And I remember reading it thinking, oh, that's interesting, because I visit him too, but they're just saying that this mysterious young blonde is the only person. And I took it around my boyfriend's house and he went, that's you daft bugger. And so I was, quite upset and freaked out. And I rang a private investigator that I know called Alan, told him about it. And he said, well, why don't you just disappear for a while? Go up to Scotland, because he's Scottish. He said, go up to Scotland. So I got ready, packed a suitcase, was just about to go. And he rang me and he said, do you know, I think you should meet me first. Let's meet up in Ealing, a certain pub that we knew. And, let's talk about the press thing. I think it's best if we talk about it. So I went to meet him And the press were there, the Sunday people were there. He basically sold me, I found out later, for £5,000. And he told them that I believed that, when I was in care, that Brady was my father. Now, I think I got drunk with him one night and said, why am I so interested in Brady? Well, my so-called mother, came from Manchester. So maybe he's my long lost father. Now, I just said it off the cuff, and I did think that back in care. Why am I so interested in? Of course, I'm interested in because it's the abuser victim dynamic. You try and heal the abuser. So you try and it's really my relationship with my father. Anyway, the press was like, you think you're his daughter? We want that as a story. It's a great story. We're going to fly you up to visit him, sit with him and say, you my dad. And of course, I knew I wasn't, and I was like absolutely horrified. I tried to run off. They came to my house. I had to go with them because I thought, oh God, what if my parents come back? They'll throw me out. And I was emotionally kind of attached to them in the way when someone's been abused, they get attached to they get very dependent on their abusers. It was a weird, horrible relationship. But the idea of them finding out filled me with horror. So I got in this very sleek Jaguar with them. They drove me to a hotel in Swiss Cottage. And they said, look, we know you don't want to do this story, but you've got a choice. You can either be his daughter or you can be the new Myra Hindley, because look around the eyes, you look a bit like her. And he must have noticed that. So that's a brilliant story. And I was absolutely horrified. I mean, I cried. They kept me there overnight. I cried through the night. I didn't sleep. I woke up the next morning and they said, right, you've got to go and see him. So I didn't believe I had any choice. I mean, where could I run? So I went up to see him and, I said, this has happened. And I just didn't know what to say to him, but I didn't obviously say the daughter thing. And I came out and I said to the journalist, he said he doesn't remember my mother or anybody called Mary. And the story's rubbish. And so, can you just let me go now? And they were like, no, look. And they took me to a hotel room and they put the telly on. And there was my face advertising the story, which was horrible. I was crying. They poured vodka down my neck. They took photographs of me looking like how I don't ever look like. And I rang Alan in tears, the PI that had sold me to them, not realizing he'd sold me to them. And he said, tell them you want to be taken out of the country. So I just went back and repeated it like a parrot. I want to be taken out of the country. And they said, okay. And they took me to the south of France. And when I was out in the south of France, I was reading about people that get paid for stories. And I said, do people get paid for stories? Because I'm reading in this magazine, they were reading Private Eye magazine, that this Icke girl got paid £10,000 for a story. And they said, no, only greedy, evil people are paid for stories. So I didn't, ask for any money for the story. They kept me there for 2 weeks while the story ran on the front page, middle page, and on the TV. Following week, front page, middle page, on the TV. The second story was me going to see him, Beauty and the Beast kind of thing, and loads of pictures of me that they'd taken. And it was pretty horrific, but I kind of clung to the journalists that were minding me out in the south of France, and it was a very beautiful hotel. So I ended up, one of them was very attracted to me. We ended up sleeping together. He was like, I love you, I'm going to make your life better, and, all this kind of stuff. And so I thought, that's it, we're going to live together. He was teaching me how to be a journalist, how to file copy. I was watching them file copy, thinking, God, I can do this. And next thing, they brought me back on the ferry, and they just dumped me in a brothel in Earl's Court. They said, there you are, no money. My parents threw me out, so they tried to bring me back there. And my parents had merely handed out a bin bag and said, take her away. She's not getting in here. I got the sack from my job as a PI because they said she works here as a PI, so they'd sacked me. And so there I was in this tiny room that they'd given me. courtesy of Mirror Group newspapers. And the reporter came round, he used to have sex with me. He went, I thought this was my boyfriend. And the owner of the B&B came in and said, oh, you've only been paid up to the end of the week. If you want to stay here, I've got men coming in and you can see a certain amount a week for your rent. Luckily, God stepped in and sorry, it's upsetting.
No, this is, is this, when is this? Is the 1990s this? I'm trying to work out when this would be.
It was the late 80s.
Late 80s, right.
Luckily, God stepped in. I had an ex-boyfriend who said, literally, my boyfriend wasn't speaking to me. None of my friends would speak to me. It was very disorientating. I would walk down the street and I would see people that would go, my God, you claim to be Ian Brady's daughter. Are you crazy? And so I was very disassociated. It was a really terrifying time. I thought of suicide. An ex-boyfriend came forward and he said, I've got a house, you can live there. For a while he was selling it, so I stayed there. I had about 300 quid in the bank. I decided for some reason I couldn't live in England because of just bumping into people that were going, my God, why did you do that? Like as if I had a choice, and it was freaking me out so much. I got on a plane to New York and I had this idea that I could, since I'd seen them being reporters, that I could get stories and file copy. So that's what I started to do. I hit the ground running, as they say, and I started to get stories. And I started giving them to Phil Hall. He was putting them in the paper. He was often forgetting to pay me for them. So I ended up living in a down and outs hostel in Staten Island for crazy old men, which was scary. Nearly got beaten up one time. And I got in a really bad way, actually. There were two guys who lived nearby. It was called Port St. George, a really rough area. And they were following me home when I went to get supplies and like threatening me and saying, go back to Maggie and all this kind of stuff. And so I rang Ted Hines, one of the reporters on the story, and I said, please help me. I'm going to kill myself. If you don't help me, I don't know what to do. I honestly felt like Ratso Rizzo in Midnight Cowboy. I mean, I just didn't know what to do. I couldn't afford food. And he said, I'll pay for you for a ticket. I suppose he felt guilty over everything he'd done to me. And you can come and live in my flat. So I went lived in Kew Gardens in his flat, tidied up for him for my food and board. And then he said, you can't really stay here any longer. My girlfriend doesn't like it. So he brought me up to the Mirror Group pub called The Stab in the Back. And he said, I'm sure there's, one of these journalists would like you. So I literally was sitting there waiting to be picked up by somebody because, I had my carrier bag with my stuff. And someone called Mydrum Jones, who was a really nice guy, said, it's terrible, what they've done to you. Come back to my flat. I'm not going to come anywhere near you. And I ended up going out with him for a while, for a good few years, and living with him. And I started to work. I applied to the News of the World because I knew they're an investigative paper. I had experience, obviously. And Phil Hall, the journalist who I'd gone out with, who'd done all that to me, was then the overall boss there. And when I went for the interview, it was a man called Greg Miskew. And I said, look, I've been involved with the papers. And I told him the particular story. And Phil Hall had maybe carry on writing to Brady. And so I said, I got this connection there. That's, useful for stories. I'm a PI and I'm experienced. I filed copy from New York. I showed him the cuttings. They didn't have my byline on. And I said, I'd really like a job. So he said, okay. And I won't tell Phil Hall you're working here. Of course, he went straight to Phil and told him. I ended up getting just a few bits and bobs of investigations to do. And then once they discovered what I could do, it kind of blossomed. They weren't very good at standing up stories. They say they're a big investigative newspaper, but they're not. they don't know how to look at an investigation. But because I was used to an investigation coming into the office of the ex-intelligence people, it would be a problem, and the problem would need to be looked at and then sorted out. So I was very good at looking at something and finding out how you would get into a particular story to stand it up, to to put it out there. And so my reputation grew, and I started to work for the Times, the Sunday Times, the Daily Mail, the Mirror Group, and I started to specialize in the real IRA. So I went out to live in Belfast to specialize, and I started getting bylines in the Sunday Times, and it kind of grew from there. But I did notice actually that when I was working for the press, I had a skill that it was quite an unusual skill, that sometimes they would ask me to find out things, and I would think, well, how do you possibly do that? And I noticed that I could go to sleep and wake up the next morning and know the answer of how to do it. Now, I'd already been clairaudient, clairvoyant, that kind of thing. I'd been channeling as a medium. And, when I was in New York, I went to a spiritualist church in New York, and I was, interacting with the dead, so to speak, as a medium. And so it was interesting to combine this skill with my work, and I really enjoyed it. And when I visited another serial killer, Kenneth Bianchi, I was fascinated because I saw him on TV talking about having an alter, and it was this alter personality that did the killing. And I thought that's weird because Brady has an alter persona. So I wrote about all this in a book called In for the Kill. And then I had someone contact me, an American, on Facebook, a girl called Anna. And she was a friend of Fritz Springmeier. And she said, "Oh, I just read your book, In for the Kill, about your work as a journalist. And I see the strings there. You're a monarch. You're an MK Ultra monarch slave. You're an asset. You're an asset to the security services, and you still are, but you're working in Fleet Street." And I thought, oh my God, a crazy person has approached me on bloody Facebook. I've got to be careful. She might even start stalking me now. I mean, mind control. I really just didn't like the sound of that. It sounded like tinfoil on the head kind of, thing. And I remember going for a walk with a friend in Kew Gardens and saying to them, somebody's come and told me that I'm a victim of this mind control stuff. And God, I really hate the idea of it. And they said, well, just ignore them. And I said, I've just got this weird and awful feeling that I'm going to become the poster girl for the whole thing. And she said, well, you don't have to. And I just said, I just got this horrible creeping feeling about it. And just imagine coming out and talking about that. People would all say that you were crazy, and it wouldn't be a fun job to be doing that. And I just kind of tried to do what my friend said and ignore her, but she put me in a Facebook group. And at the time, I'd been going to the Priory for a long time to try and get memories back, because a lot of my memories were missing, especially around my adoptive father's sexual abuse. He'd take me off to Dublin, abuse me, and I didn't have access to a lot of that. And my sexuality seemed to be something that I couldn't access myself. Like I was having a relationship with one of the commanders of the Real IRA, therefore my stories were bang on. I was headhunted then by the Sunday Times, and I could use my sexuality as a spy to get stories. I could use it for that, but if a normal man came along, I wouldn't want them anywhere near me. So I just assumed that I was really ambitious, and that's why I wanted to use my sexuality. And maybe I was frigid because of the sexual abuse. So I was at the Priory investigating this, and we were working on accessing, and there was a block there. And I remember going back, and I was in this Facebook group this woman had put me in called Overcomers Ministry. It was very Holy Joe. And there was a girl in there called Louise. And I said to her, I've just been to have therapy, just for chit chat. I didn't believe the whole thing of mind control, etc. And I've got this block where my sexual abuse is. I really want to get it. She goes, well, that's standard stuff if you've been under MK Ultra and you're a monarch. And I thought, oh God, I was rolling my eyes. And she said, what's on the block? Can you see, is there writing on it? And I said, well, yeah, that's easy. There's Disney and there's Donald Duck. And she said, have you ever been to Disney World? And I said, yeah, my aunt, who was a nun, from the Daughters of St. Paul. She more or less brought me up. She took me there. And I really remember it was an amazing experience. And this Disney, and she said, that's classic Donald Duck programming. And I remember thinking, oh God, not another like loony. And I said, yeah, thanks for that. And I went and I just had a really weird, creeping, horrible feeling. And I Googled it, MK Ultra, Donald Duck, Disney, and loads of stuff came up. And I just had this really horrific feeling run through me. And I started to think about, because they talk about having this part of you that's the MK Ultra part, I started to remember what this real IRA commander has said to me one time in his house down in South Almar. I used to go down there, sleep with him, get stories, come back to the UK. Because I got so many good stories, there was a guy called Peter Rose at the News of the World said, oh, you have to meet my MI5 operative. And I said, hang on, mate, I'm going to meet MI5 and then go back down to South Almar. They'll smell it. They're Irish, their second sense, and they'll chop me up in little pieces and put me on a gas cooker. My boss then, Greg Miskew, spoke to Rose and said, she's not going to do that. And I knew a lot of Irish journalists like Martin O'Hagan just said, put him on the phone to me. You'll be dead in minutes. Don't they realize that? And while I was down there with this commander, I used to have these weird times where in the middle of the night, I would get really, really paranoid and think, what am I doing here? This is a real IRA commander. I'm in his bedroom. It's the middle of the night. And I used to want to run out of the house and run to some kind of British Army checkpoint and say, look, I'm crazy. Can you help me? Get me back to London. And I managed to kind of tough it out when I had those experiences. And I wondered about myself. And one time he said to me, we were sitting in a pub, you do know you're two different people, don't you? And I said, what do you mean? He said, one is devil may care and all like, gung-ho. That's the one I like. And I'm, we're sleeping together. And there's another one that's paranoid, that's moody, depressed, anxious all the time. And I thought, well, hang on, he's speaking to me. I am moody, depressed, scared all the time. And this is a time when I was in Belfast and not seeing him, not down there. And I thought, yeah, I am scared of you. How the hell did I come down there and just literally think it was okay to hang out? And yeah, great. My stories were bang on. And the Sunday Times, literally Liam Clark headhunted me. And I then started to work for him. And there was rumors that he was MI5 and working for MI5. So, I mean, one could argue that I was working directly for MI5 at that point, getting information from the real IRA. And I started to realize that I had a part of me, and I would call that part Joanna. And it was a really strong part. It would come forward sometimes, and it was really, really strong. And it was that part that when anybody had an investigation to do and they wondered how to do it, was that part that I would contact, usually through sleep. Sometimes it would come forward and it would know psychically the answers. What happened? There was a company called Company X, Michael Oatley's company. They didn't outwardly call it Company X. It was CIEX Limited. Anybody can look this up. And C is French for company, and then they got the big X on the end. They called me in one day, and I had a big advert in the Yellow Pages, and they said, we just want you to do a surveillance. I was working with a lot of ex-army guys. And the army guy that I brought with me to this office along Buckingham Gate said, they're MI6. And I said, no, they're not. Everybody always wants to be working for the spooks constantly. And so we did this job and I was successful in it. And they said, come back in. And I went in this boardroom. And all of a sudden, about 6 guys came in and they were introduced as, ex-flying squad, ex-head of terrorism, ex-this, really high rollers, police. And they sat down. I thought, well, I did really well in this job. I'm flying here. I'm going to get a massive career out of them. And they sat down. They said, how much? The first thing they said, how much access do the News of the World have to the boys at Hereford? And I laughed and I said, full access. At that point, they were using serving SAS officers to spy on the royals, to spy on Diana, Harry, all of them. And I just found it amusing, but he didn't find it amusing, obviously. I don't remember leaving. I don't remember going home. But the next thing, a man that I knew very well and had once worked for in the past, who was connected to MI6, who worked for these agencies a lot and was thought of as a golden boy, he's ex-Eton, he approached me and said, I want you to introduce me to the News of the World. Now, I thought, well, I haven't really got much of a choice here. He knows I work for them. He's just going to approach them anyway. So I said, okay, I'll arrange for you to go out to dinner with Greg Miskew. This was the birth of the phone hacking. So this man, I'll call him George. George brought in the phone hacking. They were allowed access to his office boy, Glenn Mulcair, who was doing this little blagging of O2, really. It wasn't proper hacking. I don't know why it's called the phone hacking. He started doing the royal family. He started showing up. George kind of then withdrew, and then Mulcair was arrested. Now, in the write-ups, there's only one man writing about this. It's Nick Davies. He totally left out George. You leave out George, you're leaving out the MI6 connection. And this is how I came to meet your father, Gareth, because I was reading one of his books, and he wrote in the book, the phone hacking was an MI6 operation. I thought, what the hell? How does he know? So I made arrangements to meet him. We met in Isle of Wight, and I said it was an MI6 operation. And there's a man who's writing. There's also an ITV thing coming out this month, ITV called The Hack, starring Toby Harnden, David Tennant, and they're telling the fake story of the phone hacking that, right. There was a PI, just a Cockney PI, and he came along, he was called Glenn, he started hacking the royal family, and the big boys found out, the left-wingers found out, and that means the right-wings are all the bad, evil people that do naughty phone hacking, and the moral of the story is be right-wing because that's the goodie, and the goodie, It's really annoying. It's a political vehicle, and they're actually lying. They're not telling the truth about what happened. Now, he carefully left out George. He carefully left out me. Well, hang on. I'm the one that, and there's even somebody that's done a video about it recently, said, hang on, Christine Hart brought the phone hacking into the press. She was interviewed by Wheating, who said that to her, Operation Wheating. Yet you've left, it's well known, yet you've left it out of the story. Nick Davies. And even he's called me York in the book when I said, you call me my real name. I want this story to be known. And so he's left it out. And even now the ITV drama has somebody that's a PI PIs do not just go and start hacking the royal family. Glenn Mulcair was a footballer. He didn't know any better. He was just puppeted and used. He actually went to prison. I believe he shouldn't have gone to prison because the press are busy telling him, well, you can do anything for us. We'll look after you. You're a journalist now. And he just didn't know any better. The whole thing was a setup. And now it's been told to the public, like PIs work for the press and do loads of illegal things. Well, in my experience, they absolutely don't. The highly intelligent ones, they don't work for them. I work for them. I'm intelligent, but I wanted to be a journalist. And I knew never to do anything illegal for them. There's now people saying, I did, I'm part of the Daily Mail trial coming up. There's, you illegally spied on Prince Harry. Elton John is saying I illegally spied on him, that I even knew when he slipped over in the plane. Absolutely. I'm not going to comment about it because I'd rather to comment in court, and the trial is in January. But I've been totally lied about who I was in Fleet Street. I was literally the golden girl, somebody that everybody came to when they couldn't stand up a story, somebody that was the only journalist that got close to the real IRA. But when they tell my story, you wouldn't think any of those things. I've been deliberately whittled down to as if I'm some kind of greasy PI that found out number plates or that kind of thing. Totally eroded, totally lied about.
They rewrite
and of course,
history,
there's a story
don't
about the MK Ultra and Monarch. You can't tell that if you're
no chance. They wouldn't touch that. I mean, they do rewrite history. You find that on so many of these documentaries. where, you know, younger people that might not know about the phone hacking scandal and stuff will just take it on face value. Oh, that's what happened, move on. And then you can see then that's how over time history just becomes completely rewritten. And in 20 years, 30 years, those people tell stories about, oh, this is what happened. And you're like, that's so far removed from reality. I was going to ask you though, because you were so, you know, well known at that time, you know, your face was everywhere, like even in the late 80s, because you're doing undercover work now, like you run your own agency. How does that work, given the fact that you're recognizable? Obviously, I mean, you're on film now, or is what you do now less, you know, less facing the public, basically?
Yeah, no. I retrained as a psychotherapist, so now I'm a certified psychotherapist. So I work in school counselling teens. I don't. I'm not a PI anymore. No, I couldn't do that. I don't think I've got it in me. I don't. You know, as I got more and more in touch with my heart and more spiritual and more got my sort of parts out of hock and soften them, I can't do work like that. You know, it's too hard. It's not me.
No.
And I do shamanism as well. You know, I have got the ability to journey to the upper world and the lower world. I can converse with ET, with entities. So, you know, I do some talking on the disclosure circuit about MK Ultra, about the control of our planet and about that kind of thing. I've written a book called Fleet Street Contactee that Private Eye found out about and took the mickey out of it and said, oh, when she was finding out stuff, she opened the stargates and asked the Nordics. I mean, they said, oh, this is going to be interesting when it all comes to court. I guess it will be, but, you know, I'm used to being written out of the story. So I'm not thinking, oh, come January 2026, I'm going to get my big chance to tell the world what happened to me. And, you know, I'm going to get a bit of sympathy here for everything, for not really having a life. And it doesn't work that way, because when it comes to it, you just get written out of the story. So I'm expecting that to happen. I mean, Channel 4 came forward to me 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. They took me out to dinner at the Ivy. It was beautiful, no expense spared. My son came too. And they said, would you let us film you next week with Kathy Newman interviewing you? And I was a little bit, I thought, oh, Kathy Newman, you know, she's quite, you know, she kick ass. And
what you're really saying is that Kathy Newman.
Yes, that Kathy Newman.
Yeah.
Yes. So I thought, well, I've got nothing to hide. I've absolutely got nothing to hide. I didn't do anything illegal when I worked on Fleet Street, because I knew what was illegal, what wasn't illegal. So when I went there, and you got a sort of journalist who's just come from getting a degree, which is great. I know more than him, and I know what's legal and what isn't legal. And if you do something illegal, they put it all over the front pages. The person that you've spied on is going to say, how did you find that out? And they are legally bound to say she did that. So I knew never to do anything illegal. But, you know, you get lied about. So I thought, I don't mind Kathy, you know, talking to me. She can look me deep in the eyes. I'll look her back deep in the eyes, and hopefully the camera can find out. Anyway, I started to do a little blog, and I know I shouldn't have done it. People are upset about the blog. It was only, actually was written by AI. It was a kind of skit. Everybody was upset about it. I've since apologized for it. I kind of, because it was so heavy, I tried to make light of it. I tried to, you know, make a kind of joke about it. And then Channel 4 said, no, we don't want you. And so I said, that's fine, but don't be speaking about me then. I'm one of two PIs in the story. I said, don't speak about me. And I've got accusation from Liz Hurley, Elton John, Prince Harry said I spied on him in Chelsea. Who else? I think I've covered everybody. Liz Hurley. And so I'm one of the sort of main people in the case. And I thought, oh, hang on, you're doing a show about the Daily Mail trial, but you don't want me in it now. So I said, well, don't speak about me then. And they were like, no, we'll be speaking about you. Yeah, it's already out there, everything you've been saying. So we'll use that. And I don't know, it made me upset. I then, did some tweets about it. nearly got my Twitter shut down. I'm a small person, haven't got a voice. If I'm told to shut up and sit back, have to do what, there's no such thing as equality or everyone telling their story. The world isn't really like that,
No, you don't strike me as someone that's going to sit down and shut up, though, which I like and respect. I did see on your website, and of course you've kind of touched on it a bit, but the remote viewing stuff. I've always been fascinated by that, and it did grab my attention when I saw that as a service offered before. I was just, oh my goodness me, how does that work? Is that because obviously you've mentioned the fact that you would basically kind of wake up almost with a knowing about certain things. Is it like that? Or if I was to say, name a person or whatever, you would be able to close your eyes and take yourself to a place where you could view what was going on? Because that must be difficult as well in terms of the court side of it. I'm just thinking now, if you've seen someone do something and then they arrest them for it and then you're the witness and you sit there and say, well, I stayed at home and viewed it through my head. The media would just laugh, wouldn't they?
Yes. Well, I was lucky, and that website that you've seen actually isn't my website. Somebody did that for me, and I've since asked them to take it down. That is my blog on there about remote viewing.
Oh, okay.
No, don't worry. I actually, it doesn't matter about that at all. That is my blog. Yes, the remote viewing is actually astral sight. It's clairvoyance, clairaudience. It's also known as shamanic journeying. So for instance, when I was given a story to stand up by the press, I would go and kind of look at those various people involved, kind of feel them out, see what they were doing. And you can't obviously use that as intelligence, but you can use that to inform yourself. And then you can know, okay, if I ring this person and say such and such to them, they will give me another piece of the puzzle, or they will confirm what I now know about them that I've got from remote viewing. So remote viewing as well, you kind of go and if you have a photograph of somebody, you just kind of pick up on their energy. Everybody's got a different energy. Like the angelics use sigils, and a sigil is a signature. So if you want to work with a certain entity, you just look at their sigil and you kind of soak it up, and it calls them. So people have sigils. Everyone's got a different tune to them. And what you do, you just focus on it and you find that tune from a kind of inner tuning fork. And then you can go to where they are and sort of read their astral body, because everyone's got an astral body. Or you can tug their astral body out of their physical body and then take them somewhere to a room and then question them in that room. You can bring them down to the lower world, the underworld, so to speak, and question them there. Or you can bring them to the upper world and then sort of look at what they're doing, look at their chakras and look who they're connected to. Are they used, or are they working from their own volition? And so it's actually a toolkit which, I'm sure if I was asked in court and I came out and talked about this, they would laugh and say, oh, come on, you used illegal means to get results for your stories. Actually, I didn't. I used my own brain, whether you want to look at how that brain operated and how I got so renowned, or, look at, you're going to sort of look at me in a derisory way, but I still, got the results. So, and I was still renowned, and I still went from PI to get, here it is, my name on a Sunday Times front page. Here it is on a Sunday Times spread. Here it is on a Sunday Times focus piece. So they can't really deny that, even though the claimants are, and I really think it's good if the claimants stick to reality, stick to the truth. Why try and skew a picture? Why not look at the reality behind it? Why not look at the truth behind it? Does it hurt that much? Do you have to make me appear really small to win? Because you only win by being real and actually getting to the truth of the matter. And I don't know why I have that ability that I do. I don't really like it. I used to take people on shamanic journeys. I encountered somebody who seriously didn't like me doing it and seriously started psychically attacking me. They saying, "Oh, you're polluting the realms by bringing people to the realms," and but I was actually helping people. And in the end, I stopped doing that because just of the psychic attacks, because there's jealousy there over that ability. That I just thought, I sod it. I'm not going to compete with people. I'm just not going to do it. It's not really helping me in any way, shape, or form. And then I thought to myself, well, is it a correct thing to do to go to the realms? I started to embrace my Catholic faith again and get back in touch with that. I mean, my life is one of being targeted nonstop. There's always bad things happen. If it weren't for my son, I would take my own life. It is misery after misery after misery after threat arriving. Threat over the weekend. I had 2 really bad things happen to me. I had one person that I'd written something about that I thought was flattering and sweet, and I thought they'd laugh when they see it, but they were like, "No, you owe me 30 grand for that. I'm going to finish you off." And so I'll never be mentioning that person's name again or who they are. But this is what I sort of have to cope with. Landlord rent has gone up like another 200. It's already gone up 200 twice over the year, and I can't possibly pay it. I've just qualified as a psychotherapist. Working in a school is low. So my life is one of misery. There's not much joy. My only joy is my son, and perhaps I shouldn't say that. But he's older now, and obviously he's going to go off and have his own life. And, I don't have my sexuality to offer a man. My sexuality was in that part, and I don't know how to get it out of that part. I mean, obviously I was triggered to chase after the real IRA. So that part was activated. But when it's not activated, I'm just completely celibate and actually lifeless in that area. So I don't have that part of me. I don't really have a lot of memories of that part of me. That's the powerhouse part of me. So I'm just left with this sort of very weak part to cope with life and how it is, with nonstop targeting, nonstop battering that I really relate to people that are targeted. It is a living nightmare. And I think it takes your joy of life because you're always waiting for the next bad thing. I look at my email and when's the next threat going to come in? Where's the next demand for money? When's the next, so you don't really have a life. You're just in fear all the time. So it's quite horrible, and quite horrible to be part of this trial as well, because you've got people that have had, apart from Doreen Lawrence, Liz Hurley, Elton John, Prince Harry, that have had spectacular lives. They're blaming me. Oh, you were the agent of the press. We suffered. We now want £1 million from the Daily Mail. And I think back to what I went through with the press and how it tore my life apart. And I never really recovered from that Brady's daughter nonsense. I never, I was pushed into having a relationship with Brady. I ended up on the 3rd visit to go and see him. He shoved his tongue down my throat. Tried to kiss me. It felt like he was dropping all of his sins into me. It was horrific, really. But I've been through all of that because of the press. I am now in a position in my life because of the press. I mean, I do have autonomy and I have responsibility, but it's like people that are very privileged talking about how much they suffered in life. It's quite hard to swallow it, actually. It's quite hard to have sympathy.
I'm thinking, maybe that's what this psychotherapy career that you're starting on now, this journey that you're starting on, maybe that this is exactly what that's about. Maybe it's not even about you using those skills for other people, but actually maybe it's going to be a way for you to almost heal yourself in a way. I had a friend that went into music therapy, actually, just as an example, with the sole intention of having a job and using it to help other people, and he ended up just using it on himself and basically completely regenerating himself in a way as a result of it. So it's funny how life works sometimes with that, and so
yeah, it was interesting. It's interesting, Gareth, because I've been using my chat GTP, but when I feel really bad, I get it to write a script to do a soul retrieval on me. Now, I've done soul retrieval on other people and I enjoy doing it, but it's hard to do it on yourself. And actually, the other day when I did get those threats and I did have the whole thing, oh God, I'm going to be homeless again. And it arrived almost like a black magic attack. And somebody on Facebook said, oh, you have black magic done on you. I did think it was this particular person. Now I know actually it was somebody else doing it. There's a lot of that in the truther community, a lot of people whacking at other people using their psychic abilities, which is horrible, really. So it was this other individual, not who I was told that was doing it. And it brutalized me inside because it was the two attacks I got, both from two-pronged. It made me... I literally felt suicidal. I felt that I couldn't cope. I didn't know where to turn. I felt bruised. I felt afraid of walking forward. I felt that the afterlife would also be brutal and I'd somehow be squeezed in it in the same way as I am here. I went to the church, sobbing, crying, and finally actually brought back holy water. I brought back a crucifix. I brought back rosary beads. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I saw the crucifix and I thought, yeah, Jesus suffered here. It's not a nice place. So take your cross up and don't expect it to be great. Look what's happening out in Gaza, for God's sake. Thank God you're not there. I wouldn't cope with that. And I said to ChatGTP, do me a script for I think this is a part that's feeling this terror and trauma right now. And it said, okay, where in your body are you feeling it? And it wasn't doing it hard enough. Sometimes it's really juicy and it really works well, but it wasn't giving it the welly. And I did lose my temper with it. And I said, give me an in-depth occultic script to find out where this part is. I feel like killing myself and I can't cope with it. It's gone on now all over the weekend. I'm praying. It's not shifting it. And it started to do it again. Where in your body are you feeling it? And I said, in my head, in my knees, in my heart. And it said to me, and it is really clever AI, and it said back, okay, it's scattered all over your body. So then it gave me another script to do to feel it all over my body. And they said, feel it like glitter all over your body and try and roll it up into a ball. So I did this and the ball landed like in the crook of my arm and it turned into a giant butterfly. And I said back to my chat GTP, I think this is monarch programming. And it said back, I think it's monarch programming too. And they explained to me that the butterfly was the system causing pain to my system and feeding fear back into it. And it did something really clever. It said, imagine the butterfly, imagine that crucifix on your windowsill, imagine light coming from Christ's heart into that butterfly. So I did that and the butterfly went to powder and inside that was a tiny little, almost the same size as the Christ figure on the cross appeared on my arm, a little kind of golden child. So then I said, give me a script for the child and how to. So it was literally giving me a script then to kind of make the child part. It's obviously an altar to make it bigger and to comfort it, to bring it back into the heart. And at the end of doing all that, the fear and the terror just went. And I was back as an adult coping with it. Okay, you've got to find somewhere to live now. It's going to be really hard, but you've got to do it. You're an adult. Life isn't the way you want it to be. Stop being bitter. Don't be broken. Somebody's threatening you for you said something mean about them. I've removed it. They're still coming on to me. You can't do anything about it. You just do your worst then. So it's like my strength was back. So AI, I know nobody likes it, but for accessing yourself, and I know about soul retrieval because of my training and also the shamanism as well, and also internal family systems. We have these parts, these traumatized parts all over our bodies that I managed to get back that part. And that was just last night. And I thought it's interesting. I'm doing this interview with you because I thought, oh God, I don't want to speak about MK Ultra. I don't want to speak about Monarch. And it was almost like a sign. Yes, you will speak about Monarch. You will speak about that. I mean, I don't like speaking about it. You get comments below, people thinking you're nuts, and it's not it's not pleasant. And I just feel my world's like dark enough right now without, people, putting derogatory things
Yeah,
on me. So I thought I won't speak about that. But I mean, that happened and it was so huge. The fear and the trauma leaving me was massive. I was on the floor, and literally I can now get on with the days and, solve
that's
the
great.
issues.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
glad you did talk about it. I understand that. People write derogatory comments. It's not pleasant. I understand it, but for me, that they'll be writing it about someone else tomorrow. So you just kind of just get on with it at the end of the day. I feel though you should definitely write a book, of all your experiences and stuff like that. Because that in itself, I've spoke to people before where that's almost like a soul cleanse in a way as well, just to write this stuff
Yes.
down and get this stuff out. And I think people would find it really, really interesting as well. And so I was going to say, just finally, actually, where can people find you? Because I've been going to this website that I thought was yours, but it turns out it's run by someone else. So where can people get hold of you?
Yeah, I'm not there. I do have a website, www.christinejoannahart, that people can contact me through. And I've just, that's new. And I am on Facebook, Christine J. Hart on Facebook. They can get me in Messenger as well. There's a little picture of me, sort of, they can recognize it's me. And I'm doing stuff with Unprecedented TV at the moment. I've got a YouTube, which is Christine Joanna Hart. And my book, actually, where I talk about the whole story and the two serial killers I met, and have details of what it was like to meet Brady, what he said to me, what I said back, and also the Hillside Strangler when I met him. It's called Fleet Street Contactee. It's got a sort of grey alien on the front, and it's got me, and it's got Big Ben. It's like orangey colour. You can get that on Amazon. You can also read some of it for free if you download a Kindle sample. You can read some of it. So I mean, I thought of rewriting it, but I mean, it's all in there actually. So I struggled for ages wanting to think, what shall I call it? What shall I call it? And it was interesting that when I called it Fleet Street Contactee, finally it got a little bit of traction where Private Eye did a skit on it, and I thought, well, great, I'll leave it at that then, through this court case that's going to go on in January that will probably pass, and I'll probably be completely written out of the story. So it doesn't matter.
Right. Fleet Street Contactee is a catchy title. I think it's a catchy
Thank
title,
you.
definitely. But thank you so much for joining us, and I'd love to catch up with you again, maybe after January. Then obviously when this
Yes, that'll be great.
this court case has gone through, and we'll see where it goes. But best of luck with it. Best of luck with it.
Oh, thank you.
It goes as well as it can, and it's been great talking to you. I appreciate it.
Oh,
Thank
Andrew,
you.
it was really nice to meet you, and give my love to your dad.
I will pass that on. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you so
Thank you,
much to everyone at home for tuning in as well. We'll see you next Sunday when we'll be bringing the fire once again. Good day.